the podcast nowhere near Hollywood. It's Afternoon Coffee with Mike and Tim.
Hey, that was good. What I was thinking was maybe welcome to the Afternoon Coffee Podcast with Mike and Tim.
Nice try, boys, but this is how it should sound. This is the Afternoon Coffee Podcast with Mike and Tim.
All right, thank you, Heather, and welcome to part 2 of our interview with Flora Brown, already in progress.
See, at first blush, I would have just eliminated some of the, because I'm going to do this. I'm going to take your class here eventually because I think this is a great idea. Because we don't have a big family tree. My brother and I are the only two left in my dad's line. I mean, his boys haven't had any children, and just come to find out that I don't think my son's going to have any children either. With his wife's got some issues, so I think that the story should be at least told up to what we know about it. And like I said, at first blush, I would have said, there's some things I'm just going to eliminate, because it's embarrassing, it's ugly. Yeah. But I think you're absolutely right that you can look where they've come from and look where, some of your story I can kind of relate with. When I was growing up, I didn't realize that we were kind of lower to middle class until one day I pulled up in front of my high school. And I may have told this story on a previous podcast. I apologize. But I remember pulling up to the high school in my mom's Plymouth Volare station wagon that she allowed me to drive to school when I had to go to work straight after school. I think I was a junior. I think I was a junior in high school. I pulled up, and this guy, and I'll never forget, his name is Keith Goff. God bless you if you're still out there. I don't know if you're hearing this. But he pulls up next to me in a brand new Camaro.
Whoa.
Oh, no. And I was like, and I looked over, and it's like, it just kind of hit me, because I was on top of the world because I had just installed my 8-track player in this station wagon, and I was hot stuff. And it's like, dadgummit, this is this is just so weird. But I just never really thought about it, and I don't think my parents ever taught me to kind of compare myself to others and that kind of thing. And I don't think parents taught you a whole lot of anything. I just never really thought about it. Everybody was kind of in the same category. But as you get older, you kind of realize that we really quarantine us off from each other because of fiscal issues, because of race or whatever. It could be anything. So I think that if you really boil it down and look at all the ugly as well as the good and pass on that story, I think it's wonderful.
Well, you know what? I have to tell you about that. What happens if you get into my class or others like this? The very story that you are withholding because it's shameful, the thing you never talk about and you have no plans to talk about it, that's the very story that's going to push itself out onto that page. And I've taught workshops that were just a one-day workshop, 3 hours. We have the first hour I explain the concept, and the second hour they do their writing, and the third hour they read what they've written. And every time somebody gets ready to read, they say, this is something that I've never talked about. And I had no intention of sharing this. But when they start writing in a safe environment, they feel safe because I set that up in the beginning, and they feel comfortable with these complete strangers. That story comes out. And what a relief for them. Because now they see they've told the story, these strangers have heard it, and nobody died. They're still alive. Nobody passed out. Not only that, nobody was shocked.
Yeah.
Whatever their
that's because
story,
we all have junk, don't we?
We have some junk.
Yeah.
And so they realize, and the other people give, you have to give positive comments in my class. Well, that's part of the whole method. Of each story, you share your positive comment. They get praised and congratulated for sharing that because other people know it was a pain point that has been festering or where they thought they had it hidden for years, but it was there affecting their lives all this time. Yes. So I just warn you about whatever the worst thing is that you're thinking, it may be the thing that comes out when you least suspect it. And that's good. That's a good thing.
Sure. And I did want to mention, Mike, that his mommy and daddy bought that Camaro.
Oh yeah, well that's true. That's true.
He didn't
I'm
buy that
sure it
Camaro.
were.
He
He
didn't. He
didn't buy
didn't
that.
work hard and buy it for
I,
himself.
yeah, I was
Oh,
gonna
you
say I didn't
just
have a
Yeah,
car
yeah.
either, though. So I mean, we're kind of in the same
Well,
boat as far as
still,
that goes.
he
I
had
was
nothing
driving
to
Mom's
brag about.
car.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. That's
But
you're right. I've had old vehicles all my life until now, but
Mhm.
the old '64 Chevy pickup had no radio in it, and I found an old. I think through my father-in-law, I found an old AM radio, and
Mm.
I was just tickled pink. It had one speaker, in the steel dash, and one AM radio. Then I found at a yard sale an FM converter, and I hooked up the FM converter. Now I had FM radio. So it's, but I'll say this: even
plugs
if
into
you're
the
born
cigarette
into
lighter.
wealth,
Yeah,
in a
you
cigarette
know.
lighter,
I used to
if
have
you're
one.
born
Yeah.
if you're born into wealth, then I think God can teach you different skills, even though you don't struggle. But if you're not born into wealth and you're born like I was, lower middle class, probably
Mhm.
the step lower than that,
Mhm.
I could tell you some stories, and I've told Mike some things about clothing and things we had to really struggle for,
Mhm.
not making it at lunch, not sitting around while everybody else is eating lunch, and I couldn't. We were right on the edge. We couldn't afford lunch. I figured out a
Mhm.
way to do that,
Mhm.
but that's for another podcast. But I'm saying that God, I think, He teaches us some things when we don't have the wealth, and
Mhm.
we learn. And I don't care if you're pink, purple, green, black, white, whatever. That you, just because you're a certain race or whatever does not mean that you grew up in an affluent society.
That's
So
right.
that goes along with your story about the zucchini and all
Mhm.
mislabeled. So
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
can look at people and say, well, they're successful, or Grandma Flora, she's got this beautiful house. Well, Grandma Flora didn't have that house all her life,
She worked
Nope.
hard for that house.
and
Yeah,
she's
That's
still
right.
working.
That's
yeah.
She's still working to maintain.
Mhm.
So, people need to stop and think before they speak and say, well, he's privileged. No,
Mm.
or he or she. That's not
Mhm.
the case,
Yeah.
because oftentimes there's a backstory to everything. And
That's right.
I know I mentioned this in the last podcast, but life is like a quilt. We often see the pretty on top, but
Mhm.
underneath we don't see what made that quilt.
That's right.
If you
That's right.
flip it over, you'll see, oh my word, that doesn't look pretty at all.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on. I love that story about mislabeling.
Right.
That's
Right.
beautiful. That just
Well,
hits home.
there's another thing we have to keep in mind too when you talk about people who are born into wealth. Some of those are some of the saddest people. I had
Oh
a
my
couple
word.
of,
Yeah.
over the years, we've had a couple of students who were born into wealth, and some of them were so sad because there were, and this isn't true, of course, of all wealthy people, but there was no substance there. There was no there.
Yeah.
There was money to solve problems. And some of those are some sad people. And the other thing, too, is all about how you got your money, because you may be born into wealth, but your family may have been, complete crooks to
Mhm.
maintain this lifestyle. Now you've inherited a lifestyle. Now you've got to make a choice. Are you going to stay in this corrupt system that enables you to stay wealthy, or are you
Yes,
going to
to
step
sustain
out
it.
of it? If you
Yeah.
step out of it, now that's something you got to realize is going to put you in a certain precarious situation,
Yeah.
because you can't exactly step out of it very easily. So we really need to look at not envying people, but it's difficult because it's so common for us to, I mean, even just simple little things like, the internet now, people, I look at a lot of entrepreneurs who have these very fancy schmancy, websites and all the technology that goes with it. And, and maybe I don't want to have it even if I could afford it. So we have to look at that and be thoughtful about not comparing. I mean, we will do it, but we have to stop ourselves, because I do it
Hmm.
too. I'll compare, I'll go, oh my goodness. And one day I even had the audacity to feel sad that I hadn't grown up in a household where I learned about the stock market and business strategies around the dinner table, right?
Right.
And I thought about that for a minute, and I said, wait a minute. My mother was a businesswoman all of my life.
Yeah.
She didn't talk about the stock market. She talked about saving money. I didn't listen to her, but
Yeah.
about that, I didn't take everything she said about it as I should have. But I thought, what am I talking about? I did observe someone who made a living on their own terms and she spent my entire childhood and all of my life doing that. So I realized that I need to be ashamed of myself thinking that somehow or another my life was diminished because my mom wasn't or my father wasn't a corporate president or something.
Yeah.
So we have to catch ourselves and look at what we do have and decide what we're going to do with it. And another thing about deciding what you want, it's really important if it's that it be intrinsic and not extrinsic. So a lot of people ask me, which is kind of a little racial microaggression to ask, but some people ask me, whatever made you want a PhD? And I thought, how many other people do you ask that who have PhDs?
Why would you ask that?
Yeah, what? Because they are trying to figure out how did this black girl even know the PhDs existed?
Oh
Well,
my goodness.
That's amazing.
it's so that microaggression is something. But anyway, what they don't realize is that as a little kid, I loved school so much that I asked my teachers and the people at my church who were highly educated, what is the highest degree you can earn? And when I was very young, they said, well, a PhD. And I thought, oh, good. I'm going to get a PhD when I grow up. Had no idea what that was, what was involved. And so when I was in the doctoral program, a lot of people were there because as teachers or whatever they were doing their careers, they were stepping up to a higher salary or a higher position or something. I was just there because I wanted a PhD because it was a childhood dream. And and it was like so many people didn't finish their degrees because they got to what they call the ABD, where you finished all your coursework. And now you have to do your research and get your dissertation, and they call them ABDs, all but the dissertation. And of course, if you don't do your dissertation, you won't get your doctorate, right? Well, it wasn't a problem to me to finish because it was a dream, something I wanted to check off my list of things I wanted in my life. And I didn't care about, I already had a job lined up and I got another job. I didn't care about the money or the prestige. And for that reason, I have some friends who chastise me for not insisting that people call me Dr. Brown all the time. And a lot of times, I forget to even put it on documents and stuff, whatever. It's like, I don't need to be Dr. Brown to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
What? Well, why didn't you tell them you were? But they think I should,
That comes from people that are probably just so focused on what other people think of them, they think you should be the same way.
Exactly. Yeah. And but when it's a very different thing when you have been inspired to do something for your own enjoyment, for your own enhancement within your, you have an inner reason for it. It's not for society. It's not for money. That's a whole different thing. And I'm happy that most of what I've done has been because I wanted to do it for whatever, reason, childhood dream or something.
Hey, but it's something the very low percentage of the population does, no matter what color or whatever. That's very impressive. One funny story about a PhD. My wife worked at the school system for almost 20 years here in Bartow County, and there were people that would go and they'll get their masters, and of course that bumps them up pay wise.
Right.
And then they go to get their PhD, and that's supposed to bump them up pay wise. But what it actually did, they went through all that work and got their PhD, and they bumped themselves out of the system because there were so many budget cuts that have been going on the last 10, 20 years that it's like, well, we can't afford to pay a PhD to teach, English to
Wow.
fifth graders. So so you're just out of a job.
Oh my
How about
goodness.
I mean, to talk about swinging really hard with your leg and kicking your own butt. I mean,
Yeah,
it just seems.
That's too bad. Yeah.
And they want to be, and some of these people that she knew insisted on being called doctor, which is like, talk about eye roll.
That happened when I went back to my hometown years later. One of my counselors had gotten her doctorate because I left after the 1 year of college in St. Louis, and then we moved to California. So it was many years later, and I saw her at a wedding or something. And, you're used to calling somebody by whatever name you call them all of your life. And I went up to greet her, hello, Mrs. Whatever. And she said, Dr. So-and-so, I was like, oh, well, I heard she had gotten her doctorate, but I didn't know it was a thing.
It changes you, apparently.
Well, it's unfortunate that people tie their self-worth and their value to whatever, to that car, to that degree, to that house. It's unfortunate, but it happens.
Well, the only PhD Mike and I have is podcast host today.
Today, there you go.
Today.
PhD.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Post hole digger.
There you
There
go.
you go.
That's what
I've
we
got
used
one
to
of those in
call
the garage. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. It sure is. That's just the perception people have and labels, and it's ridiculous. It really is. It's just ridiculous.
I feel like we could go on for hours here. I almost hate to go on to the next subject. There's just so much here that, there was, you had so much to talk about pessimism and toxic people. And gosh, I want to unwrap some of that, but it's like, I think we're going to be way over on time if we don't get to the meat of your new book. I want to talk about your book.
Which one?
And what you, your book, this comes from your book, but your book and your new, your classes that you teach,
the classes,
teaching people how to write their own autobiography or their own history. Talk a little about that. I'd love to hear about that and how people would sign up for something like that.
Okay. The first thing you need to know is, even though I had all those degrees and was a retired teacher, it was not easy for me to write my own life story. That's how I got interested in this particular method. When I got near retirement, my oldest daughter gave me a book that has about 200 questions, and it's a journal type book. So you're supposed to go through and answer the question on that page, and when you finish all these questions over whatever amount of time it takes you, then you can hand that book to your children, or your family. Well, she gave me that, and so I looked forward to, when I retired, I'm going to fill this book in. Well, I discovered that I was not motivated to do that way, because it's you're very isolated sitting, trying to come up with these things. I just wasn't motivated. So I wrote a few things and I put it aside. Well, years later, I heard about this method, which is called guided autobiography. It's not really an autobiography, because autobiography historically has meant telling your full life story from birth through whatever age, of course, and it's usually written by people who were famous statesmen, politicians, the head of this or that corporation. They weren't typically written by the everyday person. But that's what Dr. Buren, who created this, called it. So we still call it that. It's really more of a memoir. But when I found out about this method, I was so happy to find out about something that I felt the ordinary person could enjoy, because when I took the training, we had to do everything that we were going to ask our students to do. So we had to do the activities, and then we write about a 2-page story given the themes. So he broke them into themes. And I found that to be so much easier than what I was trying to do. Most people think you start from birth, and you start, where were you born, this and that. And that's not the way at all. That's the hard way. I suppose you can do it that way. But when I took the training to help other people with this, I realized what a fantastic method it is. But also, the great thing is that you are with other people who are on the same mission, and reading your story out loud to the group is a vital part of the process. And of course, there's the strict confidentiality that's, we are pledged to. I mean, we don't have to sign in blood or anything, but expectation that there will be confidentiality. And there's something about sharing your story with other people and then having them comment, because the comments that they give sometimes surprise the reader. Like I said earlier, these are things they may have withheld, things that they are ashamed of, or things that they thought were boring and uneventful. And then they discover that, growing up on a farm and the things they had to do and the skills they learned and the values they learn are amazing to other people who hear it, and especially other people who didn't have that same kind of experience. So that's what this method does, is it takes we have themes, and all of it, there's so many life themes. The very first theme, branching points, is about the turning points in your life. And you pick one of the 14 questions, or make up your own question, and write about a turning point in your life, what was going on, what happened, so forth. And from there on, people find that it is easy to write this way than it would be if you tried to start, do a chronological thing. And also you learn in the process about yourself, because we have activities to prepare you for the writing you're doing. And the activities get you to do things like make a life graph, or I have one that I like, a decision chart, where you write the decisions you made at 5-year increments, or you chop it up into 5, but it may be at age 5, at age 20, and so forth. And then what would you have done had you not made that decision? So to look at both sides of it, the decision you made and what you think you would have done had you not. And a lot of people think, whoa, I never thought about what I would have done had I not gotten married at 18 to John. What would I have done? And it's not that it changes what you did. It's just gives you a perspective that you didn't have before. So they do a number of activities, and then those activities help to stimulate their memories and give them encouragement, and then they write their stories. So that's this method. I call it the basic course. I call Write Your Life Story 2 pages at a time, which is essentially the technique itself. And so a number of teachers use that title. But this year was the first year I finally got to set it up as an online version. I was so excited because I knew that trying to get people to meet at a certain physical location, even here locally, driving from one county to another at certain times of day, it was hard to get people to.
The traffic is awful down there.
Right?
The
traffic and just people's schedules. And so I thought, it would be so cool if the class was accessible to people from around the world. And of course, that way, from a marketing standpoint, you have a larger market.
Absolutely.
But you also have the opportunity for people who aren't, there, because I can remember seeing classes online and go, oh, I want to take that. Where is this being held? And it's in Philadelphia or someplace, So it's, so I wanted to do it online. And this year, when I was planning that class back in February, surprise, surprise, the pandemic came into our lives.
No.
And
perfect timing.
It was perfect timing, because what I decided to do was to pivot to include an opportunity for people to talk about what was going on with their lives right now as part of their stories. They could still talk about the past if they wanted, but they could also do a comparison of then and now. So I incorporated videos, activities, and so forth. And then the day I released the course to be available for purchase, George Floyd was murdered. And the protest started. And I thought, oh, I need to incorporate that too. So I added some things in the course that allowed students, if they want to take an angle from, for example, our family theme is just generic family theme questions, but someone in the one of the other trainers created a list of questions about cultural heritage, which is something that had never been in this program. So I added that to what students could choose from, and it's up to them, which thing they write. And I added videos and activities that dealt with the pandemic and all of its issues, and that dealt with racial issues and social unrest. So now the students had, more things to choose from, but they also commented on the evaluations, how much they really appreciated and enjoyed some of the videos I shared with them. They weren't my videos, they're videos from YouTube and interviews, TED Talks and so forth that dealt with these various issues. And they really were happy to, because it expanded their knowledge. Sure. Even the people who in my class who were Black learned a lot about the Black experience historically that they didn't know about, because we weren't taught this stuff in school. And so there were a number of things that expanded the awareness of the class as they were preparing to write their stories. And then at the end of the class, they have a choice, because the class is only 6 weeks. I mean, you could take, many, many weeks, years to write your story. But what they wrote really is enough, if they choose to package in some kind of way to give their family for Christmas. They can, print them off and staple it upper left corner, or they can get a little fancier and get the, you can go to one of the, FedEx office stores. Now they have, and Staples and the others, they have covers. You can have cover put on it. You can have it bound different ways. So they can get as fancy as they want. They can even go the next step and put it on Amazon. And there are a lot of different things they could do with the finished stories, and they can keep adding to it, or they can write other stories. There's some people have written 3 and 4, published authors have written 3, 4, and more memoirs. You don't have to write just one memoir.
I would think every turning point, you probably could kind of expound on that. Yeah.
You sure? Yeah. It's so much to share. And when you start hearing other people's stories, or you start hearing about other things happening in the news, or sometimes I'm even watching a TV show and it brings back a memory of something that I'd long forgotten about. Yes. Or you may see a picture and you think about, so our life stories are very deep and wide, and we could go on and on with them. And the more you are able to share and leave for your family, the better. Because even though they may not care about it right this minute, like, I doubt if my kids have pored over my book. You've probably read more of it than they have.
No.
Because it's not compelling right now.
Yeah.
I'm their mom. I'm not, Dr. Brown. They couldn't care less about that.
You fit in a box to them. Absolutely.
I'm in a certain box, and I'm not taking anything away from them. They love me. They think I'm great, but they're not poring over my book. And of course, I dedicated the book to them. And I gave them copies. And then I asked them one time, "Have you read my book?" And they go, I haven't finished it yet. That means they haven't read it.
That means I read the cover. Yeah.
Yeah. I looked at the cover. That's it. So this.
Yeah, my family doesn't listen to my narrated books, so they just don't do it. Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do? So, to answer your question, how did they find out about it? The easiest thing is to go to my website, and I try to keep it really simple. FloraBrown.com. That's my website.
I've done the same thing. Oh, yeah.
And at the very top, I put, a matter of fact, I need to go in there today or tomorrow and change. At the very top, I typically put whatever is coming up. So it'll say, get on the wait list for the next class or something. And they can click on that, get on the wait list. And then when the class is announced or about to be announced, I will let the wait list people know first. And if I'm offering some kind of discount or something, the wait list people will have first grabs at it before the rest of the world finds out. So I encourage that. And then I'm active over on Facebook. I have a group called Your Life Story Matters, and they can go there, but there are a lot of places they can go, but I try to keep it simple by putting it on my website, and from my website, you can see the social media places where I'm active and click on those. Those are live icons. And I have a blog there too that has articles I've done. So there's a lot on that page. Thankfully for you, not as much as I had on the page previously, but there's a lot for people to get into. And then they can email me or call to ask questions.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. Well, this has been we got more to do here. We'd love to have you come back.
Yeah, well, I would love to come back.
Since you've written 13 books, you write your 14th, we're going to have you on again.
Well, it depends on the kind of book, because a couple of my books are journals. And those are not as, exciting to do in a interview format particularly, but they're there. But this book has a lot in it, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about life stories. I'm very thrilled that this is something that people are interested in, and I'm excited to teach it. It makes me feel so gratified when I hear their stories, and I hear that they were made happy by it, and that's so important. I feel like that's one more person who can leave some information about themselves with their families, so their families won't know. It's too bad when we don't know about especially in the Black and other color communities sometimes, especially if our families were enslaved for many years, we don't know beyond a couple of generations many times, even who they were, because our names were changed. We don't even know our exact place of origin. So I think for us, getting the stories of the generations we do know about is extremely important. Absolutely. I think our kids need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we did talk about the 23andMe and Ancestry and doing some of that. At least you kind of get a little bit of a glimpse on what your heritage was and what country
Yeah, and but it's great because it does give you at least general regions, but it's not the same as having the stories, written down. And even I was talking with someone the other day about what format do you put the stories in so that they will last for years, because you can think about somebody, and I think it was in my class, they were saying they still had some things on floppy disk. And I was like, okay, so exactly where do you play that? And we have, so you putting things in a book, they will tend to last longer than, because generations so far haven't managed to destroy books. I mean, people say books are not as popular, but books are still popular. But if you put something on a flash drive or CD or DVD, those, may not be around, I don't know, 100 years.
Who knows if USB won't even be around in 10 years?
Exactly.
Don't know.
Well, and I'm so proud of my daughter, Molly. Molly has an affinity now to read. She's 15, but she constantly reads rather than watching TV. We've got that. We don't have cable in our house, which is ironic. I retired almost 30 years from the cable company. We don't have cable, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
but Molly reads. You don't either. So Molly's a ardent reader, and I'm very proud of Molly. And I would love for her maybe one day to get to with your program. Now she's 15, but she's not a child, but young people can get involved as well. Correct?
Oh, sure, yeah. And some people would. Some of the people who are trainers or facilitators like I am, they're all over the country, and they're offering all kinds of this program all kinds of ways. Some of them are in senior facilities, some of them are in health organizations where they're working with, people that are in a certain situation. And I think there's some, I'm pretty sure, I just don't know about all of them, who are working with teenagers. So you don't have to, the groups don't need to be that segregated in order for you to work with them. When I had one at a library, I think I had people ranging from 20 years old up to 80. So, the stories are your stories. So it doesn't matter exactly what age you are, but teenagers might enjoy working with, other teenagers and senior citizens, people in churches. So the possibilities are endless of the ways this can be presented, and especially now that we have the online option and we can do this from all over.
Well, I was thinking about maybe a husband and wife team. Could you do something like that where, you kind of have your own specific history, each one of you, then you have your combined history and put all that in one book too?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one year I did a Christmas workshop to encourage people to write letters at Christmas, chronicling what happened that year in their families, because I do that every year
My
for my
sister-in-law
family.
does that. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And I do mine in poetry form. It's not great poetry. It's poetry, okay?
It's poetry.
It's poetry, because I said so. It's not great.
That's right.
My daughter got upset when I put my poetry together, by the way, all of my childhood poetry through now, and published it last year, so that they'd have it, physically. And the class that I taught at the library, it was to write a letter for Christmas to put in with your Christmas card. And there was a husband and wife in there. And they said, when it was time to do the writing, they said, do we need to sit together and work on our letter together, because we're from the same, household? And I said, absolutely not. You're going to write your own letters, because no matter that they are from the same family, they have two different perspectives. And there's a lot to say from different angles about what happened all year. And it was so amazing. They were surprised, I think, when they finished their stories and we were reading in the group, and their stories were different. They were about the same family, but the wife had a certain perspective and things she focused on, and the husband had something else. So even if you had a whole family, if you had kids and the parents, the stories would be different. You got those.
I could see if it's too different, it could start a fight.
That could, yeah. I could definitely see if my daughters and I wrote about anything growing up. Oh my goodness, what a difference those stories would have. But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of it.
They challenged the authority of your mother, and you were like, hey, just do it, stupid. So, yeah, that's wonderful. Gosh, this has been so great. I almost hate to end this, but it's a fascinating class, and florabrown.com if they are interested in your classes, and or florabrown@gmail.com if they want to contact you directly. And I'm sure that all your that link is on there, as well as all your social media. So it's been fantastic. And all your books are on Amazon. I double checked all that.
Yeah.
All the books
there are a couple that aren't there anymore because they are out of print. But yeah, and Amazon, they can just go to Flora Morris Brown, the whole name, and find all my books under that listing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So there, and I think I put another link for you guys if you share that. That's Amazon actually has an author page. And it's like amazon.com /author/Flora Brown. And that way you can see not only my books, but I put some videos there, some photos, and my bio. So it's a cool thing that Amazon's made available for authors.
Yeah. Well, we'll try to make sure we put that on social media. I've been kind of remiss on posting all the good links on our social media when we promote our podcast. So it's all my fault. So
It's a lot of
Wow.
work to stay on
It
top of all
is.
that. It's a
Well,
lot,
Mike
really.
does obviously a good job here, but we are all of our podcasts are at afternooncoffee.us, right, Mike?
Yep. Everything up till today. Yeah.
Afternooncoffee.us.
That's great.
So
Yeah. So anyway, it's been
good
fantastic. I
stuff.
appreciate you coming on with us.
Certainly.
It's again, Tim, this is probably one of our, if not our best one so far.
I'm telling you.
It
Well,
really
Okay.
you
is. I
just
mean,
have a great you have a great
Lynette,
calmness about you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Lynette
you.
talked you up so well, and
Oh,
you
did
have
she?
delivered 100%.
I
Yeah.
paid a
So
lot for that too, let me
I
tell
guess
you.
You
you did.
did.
You
Yeah,
got your
I
money's
did.
worth.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you.
So
I'd send her another
give us
$10 if I were you.
so Flora, give us maybe a final quote that will stick with and resonate with many, many people. Give us a final push,
Oh my
final quote.
goodness.
On the spot.
The final quote I would have to say, one of my favorite quotes, and I may quote it not correctly, but that the most important thing in this world is to help someone else. Because when you help someone else, you actually are helping yourself too. It helps you, it helps them, and we all need that encouragement from other people. You don't have to know the person that well. If it can be on social media, we tend to be filled pretty distant from people. But when I see that someone's posted something, they just, reached a certain milestone or whatever, I congratulate them. How long does that take to write congratulations? Go for it. That was cool. Whatever you want to say, because that little something like that makes a huge difference. And later, as we grow older, the little things become the big things.
Guests on the Afternoon Coffee podcast stay at the Real Rest Inns and Suites, the only 2-star hotel in the tri-state area with a don't ask, don't tell policy for snakes and other exotic pets.
This episode has been made possible by our awesome intro voice, Heather Foster. You can find out more about her at heatherfostervoice.com. All music has been provided and produced by Marble Planet Productions. You can hear more about them on Instagram at Marble Planet Productions. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can either email us at afternooncoffeepodcast@gmail.com or tweet us at afternoonjava.